Hello, everybody. Welcome to the West Coast Offshore Sailing Part 1 of Part 3. We're just going to give everybody a couple of seconds here to filter in. We're expecting some rain tonight, so hopefully you guys are huddled around the TV, multitasking, watching the America's Cup, and tuning in with us. Again, this is Part 1 of a 3-part series. We're going to focus today on the Islands race and the Cabo race. So I think we'll just go ahead and jump in. So today I'm joined by two local experts and two of my buddies. Patrick, you there? Is your internet working?
I believe so, Alex. I think we're here. We're live.
And Brian Janney, where are you coming in from?
Coming in from the loft here in San Diego.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. And this should be a great presentation. Besides the three of us, this is a list of all the guys here in Southern California who you can reach out to with any sort of questions. Clearly, everybody has a little bit more experience than I do. Just up here, I'm this third, right next to Brian. My virtual Vendée Globe didn't make it up on the list of achievements, but I got a while to catch up to these two. But if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to any of us. If you don't know how to get a hold of us, go online to northsails.com or just Google North Sails Southern California, and our contact information should be there. So today we're going to talk about the Islands race and the Cabo race. We're going to start with the Islands, or I guess we should call it the Island race. Patrick, how many times have you done this race, and what's your favorite part about it?
So let's see, I've done the race 6 or 7 times, and obviously, the iconic rounding the west end of Catalina has got to be one of the best parts of the race. It's always a really cool thing. You come up and approach Catalina, got to make your way around the west end, which always is a little tricky. And then in years past, we had that power reach when we went over to San Clemente. And that was always actually one of my favorite parts, to be honest. But we're now it's actually a little bit of easier course, and you come out there and you can really start getting into more of a downwind mode earlier. So, and in that regard, you get into the bigger breeze going downwind pretty early on. So that part's really cool now.
Yeah, so this race is the first weekend in March. It's hosted by Newport Harbor Yacht Club and San Diego Yacht Club. March is it's not such straightforward Southern California sailing. Talk a little bit about, when to take the high road. Everybody thinks that trip out to the west end is probably the trickiest. There's a lot of ways to skin the cat there. Talk a little bit about your thought process in that first leg.
Yeah, so I like to look a lot, obviously, the goofy thing, that our favorite word here in Southern California, the Catalina eddy. And so if the Catalina eddy is in effect and you're starting to get southerly wind, it's really a matter of how strong the southerly is and how prominent it is the morning of your race. And so you really got to pay attention to that. It's pretty clear cut when you get going and you have a west wind filling in early, and it's going to be like a west-northwest as you cross. Now, one thing that, people don't, ask about is whether you go up, and like here you can see trying to go a little bit further north early on in this model where you're seeing people actually kind of make their way over there. I don't know. It's always tricky. That's always a hard one to make stick from my experience out there. You end up going up. There's a lot of current actually in the channel that's going kind of north to south basically, or, and so you end up looking really good on that crossing a long time, and then the boats that start getting over to Catalina, you sometimes really cave into their transoms. So being a leeward boat on the approach when you're starting to get over towards shore can be, really strong. That said, if the wind's far enough right where you're laying, you might be able to actually make it the whole way across. But most of the time you get headed, you get in the current, and you start having to come in and short tack it up on the leeward side of Catalina. And then it's, it's a tricky part to get around and how far off you stay on the west end. But big key is knowing whether or not you have a southerly component early on or a westerly component to just really go straight across.
Yeah, I think this southerly route was my friend Doug Rostello a couple of years ago on the Patriot, where at one point he's pointing at Avalon. He's going to the Blue Water Grill for dinner. Brian, talk to us a little bit about the backside of Catalina. Whoa. Zoom went crazy on me there. What sort of conditions can you kind of see on the backside of Catalina and then from the east end into San Diego?
Well, it's a little bit different. Because we used to go reaching along to San Clemente Island, but now go right behind and straight to San Diego. So as soon as you're around the west end, you're gonna be looking into a kite pretty quickly. And then got to be careful. You can see like a black model there. You can get sucked up into the lee of the island. So if I had to guess, you're probably going to be just south of Rumline a little bit, and then coming into San Diego on a nice little run reach.
Yeah, yeah. Our good friend Artie Means put this together for us. You know, we really like to thank Artie for his time. He's one of the most exceptional navigators probably out there, maybe in the world. Brian, tell us a little bit about this chart. This is obviously from a navigator's perspective. What is Artie thinking with all this?
So they take those routing like you saw, and they'll throw it into a program which shows you percentages. So this is basically showing you wind speeds going up. At the bottom of the chart says 3 knots going up to 39, and then across at 40 degrees true wind angle to running at 160. Since it's a multi-hull, that's why you don't see too much past 140 on this particular chart. And so basically this tells me they're probably going to be doing a beat to the island. And then for them, their running is at 130 to 140 most of the time. And then this just helps the crew know which sails to get ready.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. You know, the Argo, this was done on a day. It wasn't Monday when it was blowing 50, but it was done, you know, on one of the windier days, and they're doing the whole race in 7 hours. They're freaking hauling the mail when they do stuff like that. I don't think they're going to make it out here this year. Artie's services are, you know, can be used by anybody. If you guys would like to use Artie at all, he's a friend of North Sails. Please reach out to us and we'll get you two in contact. He does weather routing, grip files. He's really an all-purpose navigator that can get any team ready for a race like this. So after the Old Islands race comes the Cabo Race, and that's on March 19th. That's the first start, also hosted by Newport Harbor Yacht Club. As a member of Newport Harbor Yacht Club, I can tell you that this race is going to happen. We're fully prepared to make it go. And this is sort of like a classic windy TY forecast where it's, you know, just nice breeze down the course. Boys, we're going to break this part into three sections of the race: the start, the middle, and the end. Patrick, why don't you talk a little bit about getting out from Newport and getting past San Diego?
Yeah, so again, this is a pretty classic thing. You know, anybody who's done the Newport to Ensenada knows this part of the race really well, you know, and it's kind of a tried and true part of the race course where you got to really work hard. And I think a lot of this, it's a lot, any of these distance races, getting out offshore away from the Southern California coastline is challenging. So really, really key to know your weather forecast, know what's going on. This one, you really want to look and see if there's any offshore component. You know, like right now we're in this cycle of storm, offshore, Santa Ana, whatever you want to call it. So you need to know where you are. Are you on the prefrontal southerly that's going to be working its way through the bottom and then all the way through to a west-northwest? Or is this going to be one where you're just going to be seeing that offshore drainage wind that's coming down off the mountains and offshore? And it can be really light and tricky, you know, and so you're going to have a night there. This is a part where you can really be using tight reaching sails on a westerly, and you're just doing all you can to really get out. And you know, you can see in some of these models, you're going to really, depending on the forecast, you might want to start sticking your nose out and get offshore so that you can get into that longshore breeze going down. But there's also, you know, situations where the offshore component is strong enough and there's going to be no breeze out there. You're going to want to hug the coast and actually be sailing on easterly breeze at times at night, but that can be really tricky to connect the dots to keep it going. So, you know, more than likely you're trying to get offshore to get going and make your way. Again, the Coronado Islands play into this. If you're sailing inside or outside of the Coronado Islands is a big key. You can make it work inside, and it's the shortest distance, you know, right off of San Diego, but more than likely at this point you're going to be sailing out offshore to try and get yourself into the offshore breeze to start finding, you know, better pressure.
Yeah, that's great insight. So at this time in the audience, the chat box is open. If at any point anybody has a question, just go on there and shoot it. It'll be received by me. We'll do our best to answer your questions. We'll try to not stop the presentation to answer them, but we'll try and incorporate them within our slides. And then there'll be a section at the end where there will be tons of questions. So, you know, now you're out, you're probably just past the borders, you're checking out TJ. You're sort of in the middle now. Brian, what goes on in the middle? You get down here, what's this little point called? I'm a offshore newbie.
That's Cedros. So just like Trick said, it's going to be kind of reaching, slowly starting to think about running. Probably you get near Ensenada, and then you'll be popping a kite, and you're going to go pretty much right into running. And then aiming pretty much right to where that dot is Cedros Island, and it gets pretty windy right there. I've been past there and well, drifting some years, but then I've also been past there a lot of years and doing 30 knots of wind. So you've got to get ready with your heavier kites or your reach or your A3 as you get near that point, just to be ready to be able to control the boat.
Yeah, and so my good friend Eric Champagne, he's always talking about dew on the deck and coming in the night and going out at sunbreak. You know, is he just making stuff up, or what's sort of the local knowledge on some of that?
Yeah, that helps tell you if the wind's going to shift from an offshore or an onshore. If you have kind of wet deck, it tells you it's going to be onshore, keep westerly. If it's dry, it's probably shifting to an offshore.
Well, that's good. I'm glad he's not making stuff up. He's a pretty good sailor and he owns a lot of records. So I didn't know if he was just trying to keep some secrets, but I guess he was telling me something. I got to pay attention. So now from Mag Bay into the finish, Trick, you own the record on the Mighty Merlot for the Cabo Race. Talk to us about that last third. You can smell the tacos, you can taste the margaritas, the anticipation's building. What kind of goes into that last little bit?
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, well, let me just say real quick, the race on Mighty Merlot was so wild because we got barely through one cycle. I went down, Artie was actually navigating, and I went down for my first off watch after, 4 hours offshore. Had a quick little nap, came up on deck, and I asked Artie where we are. He's like, we're jiving at Cedros. I was like, wait, what? We're already at Cedros? So that one was almost just really unique. I mean, we did it in a day and 16 hours. So it was just kind of wild. We were just lit the whole way. And I don't even think we saw Cedros. We basically jived and we were just headed right for Cabo. So that was a unique situation where there really weren't these three segments you traditionally have. But normally on like any of the other boats, when you get by Cedros, I love sailing by Cedros. It's just usually this champagne sailing, 15, 20 knots downwind. The boats are just planing along and it's like, beautiful there when it's turned on. But then it gets a little tricky down here again once you're approaching Cabo, because you can get sucked up into the beach. And again, you got to watch if there's offshore component, and that's where you're going to maybe need to go. And you might need to get there if there's not a lot of wind and you're playing those little offshore puffs. But if it's, the breeze is coming down northwest and pretty lined up with the peninsula, you can kind of get your way and not end up too close inshore. And then you get yourself to the point where you're not just dead VMG running. One thing offshore sailing I find to be a big thing is it's like ley lines on your J70, Alex. Like if you're shy of a ley line and you're just going slow for a long time and you're thinking you're going to lay the mark, but you've ended up going slow for that whole ley line. Usually there's 8 boats up to weather of you going at pace. So the worst thing you can do when approaching one of these things is kind of think that you're laying, but you're actually sailing slow in order to lay. In most of the cases, I like to be able to give yourself a good angle and get somewhere offshore, kind of where you're pointing there, and give yourself a little bit of a port jibe that's not extremely hot where you've given up a lot of extra distance, but you want to know you have it and you're sailing at pace the whole time, because that going slow offshore, upwind, downwind, reaching, it's just really not in the cards. You want to be going full throttle. And then it's really cool. You get to the Cape and the breeze can shift and really head you. And so a lot of times you have your kite up and you're reaching. And I remember coming in with 4 or 5 boats and we're all reaching, pretty dark or just right after dusk, and we were all ripping along coming up under there, and then you're trying to find the finish line, which is always a pretty entertaining ordeal as well. But really cool finish, and it's really fun then getting into Cabo.
Yeah, and Daniel Geisman in the chat box pointed out he sails on Grand Illusion that it's a virtual finish this year, so it should be a little bit more straightforward than drifting to the beach and trying to find the finish line. You know, to touch on your point, I went back through the Yellow Brick tracker. I guess I was watching it last Cabo, and the guys on the outside really made big moves, you know, late in the race. The leaders went inshore and they kind of ran out of wind, and the guys that stayed outside ended up kind of doing an end around on them. So I think you touched on a pretty good point that can't really get glossed over. So that leads us in, you know, you touched on reaching sails. There's so many different reaching sails out there. I'm overwhelmed by all of it. On the Mighty Merlot, you guys use the 55% mid-girth helix sail. Why don't you talk a little bit about that and how that's applicable in the ratings and performance?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's a little unique in the multi-hull world, and that is our downwind sail. We would use that sail when we're sailing our, you know, 138 to 145 kind of true wind angle downwind, and we get going so quickly on that boat that you're generating tons of apparent wind. So the apparent wind comes forward, and you're sailing pretty tight angles. It's really rare that the apparent wind angle is ever aft of the beam, and normally, if that's the case, you're probably not sailing at 100%. You know, you're kind of going slow. So that is just it's a more shaped like a Genoa. It is a tweener, so it's not a Genoa is underneath a 50% mid girth. So 55 is just over. It's in the middle. There would be small rating implications on you know, different boats, more monohull boats and different, you know, configurations. But that's kind of our you know, people would refer to it as a screecher in some cases, and it is essentially our downwind sail.
Yeah, cool. And Brian, you do so much sailing on the Pyewacket. You guys, you know, just traded up from an Andrews 69 or 70 or whatever to a Volvo 70 Turbo. And you've been talking a lot about your reaching sails and your 65% mid-girth sail. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So kind of like with the multi-hull, our apparent wind is always shifted forward. So our reach, our A3, is more like this middle slide here. It's a 65% mid-girth, and it measures a little smaller on the leach than, or the mid-girth than a true A3, but bigger than like a Genoa and a little bit deeper. Basically, with these faster boats, you don't need as much sail area to keep it going. So kind of this in between, or that's where the tweener came from, in between a Spinnaker, in between a Genoa, is proven to be very, very fast. And you'll see pictures of these if you watch the start of the Hobart or even the Volvo. Their A3s are the same way.
Cool. And for me on my Mighty J111, we use the 75% mid-girth sail. Brian, why is that such a cool sail in terms of a rating perspective?
So it still gets measured as an asymmetrical. The rules say that a Spinnaker needs, or an asymmetrical Spinnaker needs to have a mid-girth 75% of the foot length. That's what we're referring to on the percentage. And with these new Helix sails, in the old Code Zeros, you used to see the really tight luff cable, maybe it was sagging, and you had to put a lot of halyard or a lot of tack line on. And then usually on the leach, there'd be a section that would flap a little bit. And we all have seen them since the early 2000s. Now the sails start to float forward and self-support. And so that helps the leach straighten out and not flap. It also does another added benefit of not putting as much strain on the tack line or halyard. And so you can see the kind of the drawings from our design program here, where the one on the left is a traditional cable supported and it's sagging, and the Helix is projecting or straightening out.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool. Specifically on our J111, we recently switched from a traditional Zero to a Helix sail, and the performance gain is incredible. You know, the sail, the Helix technology transfers the load from the cable to the sail, so it allows the sail to be a little bit flatter, a little bit more aero efficient, and it's really applicable to any sort of a boat that's reaching. This is our lead designer, JB Braun, on his CNC 35 or something out in Marblehead. He put this application to the test, Trick, what stands out to you immediately in these two images between the old style and the Helix?
Yeah, so it's kind of like what we see in the diagram on the left, where you can clearly see that the white sail, which is an older style traditional Code Zero, has the sag where the stay itself is actually going to leeward. And then on the image on the right, you see a helix sail where you're getting to see positive, where the sail is actually projecting to windward. And one of the big things that comes up with that is if you look at those trim chevrons and you look at the way that they are pointing relative to the way the boat is sailing, you can see on the left here that those are really wide angled, almost like downwind angles compared to the sail. So that whole front portion of the sail is really not even working. If you look at the USA and the 26, that's where the flow is really attaching to the sail. So you know that whole part, it's not only sagging to leeward, it's just not really efficient the way it's flying. So the helix sail on the right, you see the way that those chevrons are actually pointed forward and pointing in line with where the apparent wind would be coming from. So you're getting a much more efficient flying shape. It's a much flatter sail in total, and the twist profile is going to be way better on that sail as it flies. So, you know, we talk a lot about the loads and the benefits of lower loads in these, you know, load sharing sails. But the biggest thing is that the flying shape is so much better that, yeah, I mean, it's nice to have lower load on the tack line and nice to have lower load at the halyard, but the flying shape and the efficiency of the flying shape is really massive.
Yeah, and so Brian, we're talking about a sail that can point higher and is flatter. Well, what about when you want to ease the sail out and you're more broad reaching and you're not quite into that next nylon reaching sail? Is this sail still going to be fast?
Yep. So like we were saying, how the thing floats the weather or projects, just like a normal asymmetrical, if you start to go down an angle a little bit for the sail and you ease, the sail starts to rotate the weather a little bit. The helix is going to do the same thing, where the old style cable supported sail the sail was rotating around the cable a little bit more. And now the whole thing floats out a little bit more. So it gives you a wider wind range to use it.
Yeah, and this technology was developed has been developed in the America's Cup. If you're watching the America's Cup while you're watching this presentation, the jibs on there, that's a helix structured jib. You hear our fearless leader Ken Reed talk about helix in the wing as well. So this is a derivative of that, and we've started to incorporate that America's Cup technology into our club racing, premier racing, all of our design philosophy. It's a design philosophy. So this is the Snoopy, the J125. Trick, you've done a lot of work with these guys. What tell us a little bit about what they're doing and specifically about their paneled laminate Helix Code Zero.
Yeah, so this is a 75% mid-girth spinnaker, asymmetric spinnaker, so no penalty. That's where the biggest thing comes in. We did a lot of looking at whether or not to use a tweener. I actually ended up sailing Transpac on a Swan 60 where we did use a tweener, and it was a big benefit. For these guys, we ended up using a 75% zero penalty sail. And you can really see in this shot how nice and flat the foot gets on the sail. It almost looks like a jib in the foot. But then again, the entry is not so wide. It's a really nice smooth entry, the way the sail's lining up in the beginning. And then the way the structure of these sails and the shaping, the curvature is set up, you keep the leech from doing that thing that Brian was talking about, flapping around, which drove everybody freaking crazy when we were trying to sail Code Zeros. It was just like the worst, and the whole rig was shaking, and you're like, these sails are horrible. And then now you have a sail that actually has a nice exit and it is flying with a smooth exit, no return, right? So the sail is not shifting the air or directing the air into the main. It's sending the air aft in line with the keel and the rudder. So it's all forward propulsion, and it makes the sails a lot more efficient in the way that they fly without that return. And it just is a way more efficient flying shape.
Yeah, I think that was for me, that was the most noticeable thing when we changed from the traditional to the Helix sail. I was like, wow, the main goes inside out at a much higher angle. This is great. We can sail high and not really lose that much speed. We can let it out. We can do all sorts of good reaching stuff. I've been super impressed with it. Now, Brian, this is you guys cruising down. You're probably somewhere in the no-go zone in Baja. This is the Pyewacket. You know, what is this little triangle here in the front, and what sail do you have up behind it?
Yep. So offshore sailing, we get into all sorts of different staysails. Real important one is a Genoa Staysail, especially when you're reaching. So the chart on the right is a generic crossover chart, and the dark dashed line shows you the Genoa Staysail usage. So you can see in the green box is the light Genoa, and it overlaps that. So that's pretty much as you start barber hauling out. And then the jib top, you can see it's overlapping, and then the A0 and an A3. So basically, anytime you're reaching, you can have a Genoa Staysail up. It basically looks like a little mini jib. On the this is the Andrew 68 Pyewacket. We have a little hoisting Dyneema stay that we put it up on. It has soft tanks. That's just so it doesn't blow back into the mast. And then it's very easy to douse also. So if the wind shifts forward or drops in wind speed, we just blow the hard and it just drops right to the deck.
That's great. And now I work with the Grand Illusion guys. We've created these square top Genoa Staysails that just look awesome. You know, they're a little bit lower profile, but the flying shape of them is just absolutely beautiful. And another little side note, I was watching a video of a J125 who won the Transpac last year or last go round. And I was surprised to see that, just like what you alluded to, as soon as they cracked off with their Genoa and they were starting to barber haul to the outside of the boat, they went to a Genoa Staysail very quickly. And that was pretty cool to see. That's worth checking out. So Pat, let's talk a little bit about the other staysail. Now we're going downwind. Talk to us a little bit about the Spinnaker Staysail here.
Yeah, so these are super important sails on the boat again, and you know, obviously they get used when you're in more of a running mode and you're sailing downwind, and you know, VMG sailing, trying to get to a mark to leeward. Usually you can't point at it, so you're just trying to sail as fast as you can, like you're in a inshore race. Again, the Spinnaker Staysails really help. I think it's important to look at them in averages, because I think, Alex, you've said a couple times, you put them up, you go slower, you take them down, you go slower. Stole your thunder there. And
faster.
Oh, okay.
Faster, not slower. You almost had it. We'll let you off
almost.
the hook.
But the key is that you just get a much higher average the whole time. And what it ends up doing is it just takes the bow down a little bit more, and it makes it so that you're able to keep the boat loaded up, and you don't really go extreme faster, 2 knots faster, but it is a really, really important sail for long downwinds. Anytime you can get set up. The picture on the left is pretty interesting. That's a little older style where you still have the spinnaker pole and you're squaring, and then you're putting the furler to weather. They're usually on a small furler. All these nice little, there's tons of nice little small furlers now, and you can tack it to weather and get the whole sail plan up to weather. And then the boat on the right has a centerline sprit for the asymmetric spinnaker, and then your Spinnaker Staysail is going to be on centerline in that case. And one other thing to note on the left is that ocean view. It's a pretty cool feature you can put in, where you put some window material in the luff so that you can actually still see the luff of the spinnaker when it's flying and it's close to centerline. So that's an option that's really key, especially for long distance offshore sailing like that.
Yeah, so great, all great points. And I would add that, you really feel it in the helm. The helm really kind of gets neutral when you're in the proper conditions with the staysail up. It'll help you with the driving and driving around waves. So definitely something to have in your arsenal. We've been talking about a lot of big boats. We got a Santa Cruz 70 on the left. We got the Alive, the guys who just won the Hobart on the right. We've seen them here in Southern California. We got the Pyewacket. What about, I want to go to Ensenada, okay, and I got a Hunter 34 that's asymmetric. Are these staysails applicable on my boat too? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, as long as you can be efficient with the way you use them and make sure that they're going up and down, they'll help. They'll help you sail at a higher average speed. They'll help you sail a little lower and keep the boat loaded. And just like you said, the helm gets unloaded. So, it takes a little bit of work to set up the rigging and have it all done, but they're really nice sails. They're easy to handle in the way that they're small, especially the Spinnaker Staysail, because you're already going downwind, the apparent wind's aft. It's not very, the GS is a little trickier to get, up and down, and you have a little more rigging to get it set up. But the Spinnaker Staysails especially, I think almost every boat would benefit for the most part with a Spinnaker Staysail.
Totally. And, when there's no wind at all and you're slopping around, it's a good wind seeker as well. So it's got multi-purpose. So Brian, let's talk a little bit about the 3A. What is that sail? Talk to us about these codes. I'm so confused.
Yeah, so we have been talking about different kites and that kind of thing and what to have them under. So spinnakers, whether it's symmetrical or asymmetrical, it's odds are reaching, evens are running. So A1 would be your light air VMG sail. Then you go in your A2, your first runner. And then your A3, which is kind of your medium to heavy air reacher. And the A3 is slightly smaller than your A2 in area, usually a little straighter in the luff and twistier. So the clue might be a little higher than like your A2. And you can see in the picture here, the head is nice and open. So as you start to reach, it doesn't tip the boat over.
Nice. And, there's lots of different ways to pack these sails. And I know we just learned through US Sailing that yarn is illegal. So how do you keep it all together? What's the best way to hoist these kites on the long distance race?
Zippers have become quite popular. Like you said, they just changed the rules. No yarn, no rubber bands are allowed at all anymore. And it used to be where race committees could write that rule out, and now they're not allowed to. So what we do is we have zippers that roll the whole sail up. You zip it closed. It goes usually down to, like in this picture, it'd probably go to about the middle chevron. And then another one that goes from the tack up, so probably to the bottom chevron. And then it makes it very easy for the whole sail to go up as if it was banded. And then the zipper splits apart and the whole sail balloons open.
Yeah, that's cool. I work with the Andrew 77 guys, the compadres, and we're working on getting all the zippers together. And I know those guys are going to be super stoked with what we put on their sails. So this is something that can be added to an existing sail or come with a new sail. It's not like you have to get a new sail to get the zippers. If you have an existing sail and you think that it might be good to have some zippers, contact us and we'll help make it happen. So Trick, what are these orange things, man? It looks like we're about to go Hobie 16 sailing.
Yeah. No, those are the storm sails there, Alex. Those are the real deal. This is the trysail and the storm jib. And these things, yeah, you never want to use them. And I've been lucky enough in the majority of all my offshore sailing that I've never had to use them specific. Oh, that's not true. In the Chicago Mac, there was a short period going through the Manitou Passage up and we did put a storm jib up. And luckily in the Mac races, it's usually pretty short that you have to do them. But yeah, they're super important. By rule, you have to have them. Most of the time, you have to carry a storm jib at least. And in some of the different race rules and offshore regulations, you're going to need to carry a trysail as well. One of the things it's all joking and all kidding aside, you do want to make sure you know how to use them and the sails will work right. If it's blowing, like we had that gale here in San Diego, early this week, it did some damage to our house. It's done damage
your
everywhere.
house could have used them.
Yeah, we needed to reef our roof, but the problem is that you really need to be ready to figure out how to do this when it happens, if it happens. So make sure your systems are right, test them out, put them up. One of the big things on the trysails is you're going to be exposing the luff. If you get 5 or 6 feet of luff exposed without it attached to anything, and you're expecting to be able to hold on to it, that's not going to go well. So just know how you're going to do it. And then Brian made a point that is a really good point to write on there. Normally you have a sheet attached to the clue of the staysail, the storm trysail. Make sure that you know where it's going to sheet, have the sheet ready. And then it says, to outboard lead, by the helm station, wherever it is. So you just know how to do it. And it's easy to do. The other thing to remember, if you're going to set storm sails, almost 100% guaranteed you're not going to be able to communicate to the other people on your boat because it's going to be so loud and everything's going to be rattling. So just keep it in mind. Yeah, it's like easiest to say don't use them, but make sure that if you somehow or another do end up in a situation where you're going to have to put them up, that they're going to work.
Yeah, great point. You don't want to get into the middle of the storm and be like, okay, what do we do now?
Yeah.
A question from Marnie. Isn't there a rule that allows a deep reef in the main in lieu of a trysail? Brian, you want to take that one?
Yes, you can do it as a reef, but I don't have the percentage memorized. It has to be a very, very high reef. I think it has to be something like, it's down, you have to be 20% of P or something like that, which is your luff length. So the reef would have to be in pretty much around your second batten down in order to count as your storm try.
Wow, that's up there. So sometimes, you know, what are you guys preparing for a storm, Brian? What's going on here?
So if anybody's watched Hobart and the starts there, you probably noticed the Super Maxis are putting up an orange sail as a staysail. So this is the new Pyewacket, the Volvo 70. When we're triple heading, meaning we have 3 sails up, we've made our storm jib work as a staysail. It's a small Genoa Staysail essentially for us. And you'll see that in probably the Volvo, those guys do the same thing. If on these boats, they're so heavy, if you have to carry it, you might as well make it work for you.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, so we shouldn't panic if you're coming by us with the orange sail up. I'll be okay.
No, not yet.
So you can paint sails too, right? Is this a coloring project for you guys at the loft? What's going on here?
Well, the rule says it has to be orange, or a certain percentage of it needs to be orange, even if it's an old sail. So instead of building a new sail, we can paint either the whole thing or stripes onto it, certain panels, in order to comply with the rule.
Okay, so if you have a sail that you think could comply, contact us. We'll bring it into the service, and we'll promise to paint within the lines here and not make it a coloring project. So Trick, this is, you know, we're kind of getting towards the end. What are some things that you like to have on the boat and go through to kind of be race ready?
Yeah, this is a key. The sail offshore repair kits are a big thing that I spend a lot of time with all the boats I'm racing on and all the clients I work with, you know, to get ready for offshore racing. These checklists are really nice to have. Contact us if you want one, because it's really key to have all the stuff and know what it is when you need it, and you know, be able to use it out there so you know what you have. But it is amazing what you can do offshore. I mean, you can fix kites with Dacron insignia. We have some actual arrest tape that's made to repair spinnakers. There's a Cuban fiber PSA that I know we use tons of and everybody just loves it. It comes in a couple different widths, and having that stuff on board, you end up using it as like chafe guard for sheets when you're cross sheeting. People use it, you know, it's really nice for abrasion on stanchion patches or somewhere where the like a head sail's riding on a bow pulpit or something like that. But just to make sure you have the right tools. And one of the cool things with 3DI material now is that you can do actually pretty big repairs, like we saw actually these guys map free down in right by the tip of South America there, and Cape Horn, and they had to tuck in and glue their sail back together. But the beautiful thing was you can use, you know, we use a Loctite glue that we can get in small containers, and you have some material, and you can do some pretty awesome stuff repairing pretty major, you know, tears if they were to happen offshore, and stuff happens offshore. And like these guys glued that thing together, and they finished the leg all the way, I think they were going into Brazil. And you can do stuff like that with the modern 3DI material. So if you have some of the 3DI 5-ply, I really like that, the 5 ULF 5F glue that we use, and just having the tools, the scissors, all the stuff, so that you're not, you know, you have a sail you can fix that's still going to be usable if you have the right stuff. If you don't have the right stuff, that sail is just going to be luggage and be in the way and heavy.
Another question out there: how soon can you use a sail after it's glued?
Yeah, pretty quickly. That stuff goes off pretty quick. I don't remember exactly off, but you know, you can use 5200. 5200 is pretty messy and it's a little harder to work with, and it makes a pretty big mess. And that one you do need to let cure. The Loctite, I think you can get onto 12 to 24 hours for sure. And but you know, don't quote me on that exactly. You got to get the packet out and read. But it is amazing that you could, you know, you can, not could, you can repair a sail and make it work again when you're out there.
I find directions to be more like suggestions, so you know, it's okay. Well, you know, we're getting down to the end here. If anybody has any questions, now's the time to ask. We have our San Diego boat show going on where there's a discount. So I know that there isn't a ton of people here, but for those of you who catch us on YouTube or on the North Sails website, please feel free to reach out to any one of the individuals that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. Again, this is part one of a 3-part series. So we're focusing on the islands in the Cabo Race now. Part 2 will be a reflection on these 2 races and then a lead up to Ensenada. And then kind of the first part of Transpac. And then the third one is going to be fully about Transpac and getting ready for it. But any of you guys have any last thoughts? Trick, we'll start with you.
Yeah, no, it's exciting to be talking about offshore sailing again. You know, it's one of the things I love the most, and I'm just excited to get back out there and start getting some of these races going on. So look forward to seeing everybody on the water and seeing you at the finish, and we can have a margarita in Cabo.
Brian, what do you got?
Like Patrick said, it's nice to be talking about racing again. Get on the water, a little bit back to normal.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks guys for letting me, offshore newbie, you know, kind of get educated by the 2 vets. And I'm looking forward to reconnecting with you guys in a few months, time to recap this and talk some more. So with that being said, thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you in a few months.